The hall was buzzing with energy as people found their seats. Families were chatting, children were laughing, and the bright lights reflected off the polished wooden floor. The air smelled faintly of flowers, mixed with the sweet aroma of freshly baked pastries from a small stand at the entrance. Everyone was waiting for the show to begin, a talent event that promised to showcase the best performers in the city. Some performers were already backstage, adjusting their costumes and taking deep breaths, while others whispered to friends and family about what was coming. In the crowd, near the middle of the hall, a small girl sat quietly. She was not on anyone's program. She was just part of the audience. Her eyes were wide with curiosity, and she clutched a small notebook tightly to her chest. She wasn't sure why she had brought it, but it made her feel braver, a little bit more ready for anything. Her legs dangled from the chair, unable to reach the floor, and she kept tapping her foot nervously. Around her, people were talking, laughing, and occasionally glancing at the stage, but she hardly noticed them. She was focused on the lights, the music playing softly in the background, and the feeling that something special was about to happen. The host came onto the stage, smiling brightly and waving at the crowd. A hush fell over the hall as everyone turned to watch. He had a warm, inviting voice and started speaking about the talent that would be displayed that day. He talked about singers, dancers, musicians, and performers of all kinds. The girl listened intently, her eyes fixed on the stage, and she felt a small flutter of excitement in her chest. She had always loved music, humming quietly to herself whenever she thought no one was watching. Sometimes she even tried to play small tunes on a tiny keyboard at home, imagining that she was on a big stage just like this. The host walked across the stage, scanning the audience, making light jokes to keep everyone entertained while the performers prepared. Suddenly, he said something that caught everyone off guard. He announced that someone from the audience would be chosen to perform, to step onto the stage and share their talent with everyone. The hall erupted in murmurs of surprise. People leaned forward, curious and excited, wondering who it could be. The small girl felt her stomach tighten. She had never imagined that something like this could happen to her. She looked around nervously, unsure if she should raise her hand, but her heart was pounding with a mix of fear and anticipation. Nearby, an older woman who was sitting with her noticed the hesitation. She smiled gently and whispered, "It could be you. Why not try?" The girl's eyes widened. The thought of performing in front of so many people was terrifying, but something inside her stirred. She had always loved music, and for a brief moment, she imagined herself stepping onto the stage, standing in the bright lights, and letting her voice fill the room. The idea made her both scared and thrilled at the same time. The host's voice rang out again, asking for volunteers. Some children raised their hands timidly, some adults joked about their hidden talents, but the host's eyes seemed to find the small girl. He gestured toward her, smiling warmly. The girl's heart skipped a beat. She couldn't believe it. All eyes in that section of the audience seemed to turn toward her. She could feel her cheeks growing warm and her hands clenching the notebook tightly. The older woman nudged her gently, giving her a reassuring smile. The girl took a deep breath, stood up, and began to walk toward the stage. Each step felt heavy and light at the same time, as if she were floating and sinking all at once. The murmurs of the audience faded into the background, replaced by the sound of her own heartbeat in her ears. Backstage, performers were watching her approach, whispering to each other in amazement. They had seen many talented children perform before, but something about this little girl caught their attention. She moved slowly, carefully, almost as if she were stepping into a dream. When she reached the edge of the stage, the host knelt slightly to greet her, holding out a microphone. "Are you ready?" he asked kindly. The girl nodded, though her hands shook slightly as she took the microphone. The bright lights made her squint for a moment, and she had to blink rapidly to adjust. The audience seemed endless, stretching farther than she had imagined. But she forced herself to focus on the small notebook in her hand and the music she had been practicing quietly for months in her room. The host whispered a few encouraging words and then stepped back, giving her space. The silence in the hall was almost tangible, thick with anticipation. The girl closed her eyes for a brief moment, took a deep breath, and placed her notebook on a small stand in front of her. She felt the warmth of the stage lights on her face and the expectant eyes of hundreds of people looking at her. It was intimidating, overwhelming, and yet strangely comforting. She reminded herself that she loved music, that it made her happy, and that she could do this. She felt a small surge of courage and opened her mouth to begin. And that's when the first note was about to leave her lips, carrying with it all the nervousness, excitement, and hope that had been building inside her since the moment she entered the hall. The audience leaned forward, unaware of the impact this small girl was about to make, not knowing that one single note would change the energy of the entire room in ways no one could have expected. But for now, everything was still. The lights, the music, the whispers, all faded into the background, leaving only her, the stage, and the moment that was about to become unforgettable. The girl stood frozen for a moment on the stage, her small hands gripping the microphone tightly. The bright lights above made it hard to see the faces in the crowd, but she could feel their eyes on her. Every muscle in her body felt tense, as if she was trying to balance fear and excitement at the same time. She took a deep breath and reminded herself of the little notebook she had carried all the way from home. Inside, she had scribbled notes, tiny pieces of sheet music, and words that reminded her why she loved music. It was her secret companion, and for some reason, holding it made the vast stage feel a little smaller. The host smiled at her from the side, giving her an encouraging nod. She swallowed hard and took another deep breath, her chest rising and falling with nervous energy. A few people in the front row leaned forward, curious to see what the girl might do. Some whispered quietly to the person beside them, while others held their hands over their mouths, unsure if they should be surprised by what was about to happen. The girl's heart raced faster, but she felt a strange sense of determination growing inside her. She had always loved music, and now, for the first time, she was about to share it with an audience that did not know her. She carefully set the notebook on the small stand in front of her, flipping it open to the page she had practiced the most. Her fingers hovered above the keys of the tiny keyboard that had been placed for her performance, and she felt a shiver of anticipation. She knew this was her moment, but she also knew that thousands of eyes and ears were on her. She closed her eyes briefly, imagining the music flowing from her fingertips, imagining the notes floating through the air, and imagining the smiles it might bring to the faces of everyone watching. Then she opened her eyes and pressed the first key. The note rang out, clear and pure, cutting through the silence like a gentle beam of light. The audience froze for a second, surprised by the sound. It was unexpected. Such a small girl producing such a confident, strong note caught everyone off guard. The murmurs that had been rippling through the crowd fell away, replaced by an almost tangible stillness. People glanced at each other, unsure if they had heard correctly, their eyebrows raised in astonishment. The girl, still nervous, felt her confidence begin to grow. Encouraged by the sound of her own voice and the keys, she continued, carefully moving through the piece she had practiced so many times. With each note, the room seemed to change. The lights felt warmer, the air lighter, and the energy in the hall shifted. The audience, who had moments before been skeptical or unsure, began leaning in closer. Some mouths hung slightly open in amazement, and a few people whispered, hardly able to contain their excitement. The girl's small hands moved across the keyboard with a mix of precision and passion. Every note carried her emotions. Every pause reflected her concentration. The sound was not just music. It was a story, a feeling, a message that touched the hearts of everyone listening. Backstage, performers watched quietly, holding their breaths. They had seen talent before, but there was something different about this small girl. She was not trying to show off or impress anyone with flashy tricks. She was simply sharing her gift, and that honesty made it all the more powerful. Even the adults who had been in the audience for years, judging competitions and applauding talent, found themselves leaning forward, captivated by the music. A few of them felt a lump form in their throats, emotions they hadn't expected to feel from such a young performer. The girl glanced up for a moment, scanning the audience. She saw a mix of faces. Children with wide eyes, parents holding their hands over their hearts, and strangers who looked completely absorbed in the music. She realized that for the first time, she was not just performing for herself or her family. She was performing for everyone. The thought made her both nervous and exhilarated. She had never imagined that she could have this effect on people. But the more she played, the more the music seemed to take over her fear. She let her hands move naturally, letting the notes flow as if they were part of her own breath. Midway through her performance, a few notes faltered, as her nerves got the best of her for a split second. She quickly recovered, smiling to herself and continuing without hesitation. The audience, thankfully, didn't seem to notice the tiny slip. In fact, some of them even cheered softly, encouraging her to keep going. That tiny encouragement, though quiet, gave her an immense boost. She realized that it was okay to be nervous, that mistakes didn't ruin the moment, and that sharing her music was far more important than perfection. The piece she had chosen was simple but emotional, a melody she had created herself. It spoke of small joys and quiet dreams, of nights spent imagining the world beyond her small room. She poured all those feelings into her performance, letting the music tell the story she couldn't quite put into words. The audience could feel it too, even if they didn't understand the exact notes. They could sense the heart behind the performance, the sincerity of a small girl daring to step onto a stage and share a piece of herself with strangers. As she neared the end of her piece, the music swelled slightly, the notes rising and falling like gentle waves. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the final chord. The girl pressed the last key, and the note lingered in the air, echoing softly before fading away. For a moment, there was complete silence. It was as if the audience couldn't quite believe what had just happened. Then, slowly, a ripple of applause began, soft at first, then growing louder and louder. People stood up, clapping and cheering, some with tears in their eyes. The sound was overwhelming, a mixture of astonishment, admiration, and pure joy. The girl looked out at the audience, her own eyes wide with disbelief. She had never imagined that a simple melody from her small notebook could move so many people. The host returned to the stage, smiling widely, and whispered a few words of praise before leading her off the stage. Back in the wings, she felt a mix of relief, excitement, and pride. She had done it. She had faced her fear, shared her music, and touched the hearts of everyone in the room. The applause continued, echoing in the hall, and she knew that this was a moment she would never forget. It was the beginning of something special, a memory that would stay with her forever, and the first step in a journey that would inspire her to keep sharing her music, no matter where she went or how big the audience became. After the first note had captured everyone's attention, the girl felt a small rush of courage. She realized that the audience wasn't intimidating them as she had imagined. They were listening, waiting, and perhaps even rooting for her without saying a word. She adjusted her posture slightly, trying to look confident, even though her heart was still beating fast. Every movement she made felt like it carried the weight of the entire hall, but also the thrill of performing something she loved. The music was no longer just notes on a page. It had become an expression of everything she felt inside. Her fingers moved more freely now, the initial stiffness of nerves slowly fading with each note. She played carefully but with emotion, letting the melody rise and fall naturally. The music seemed to fill the room, reaching every corner, touching every ear, and resonating in every heart. The audience leaned in, captivated, as if the hall itself had hushed to listen. Parents wiped quiet tears from their eyes, children sat on the edge of their seats, and strangers exchanged amazed glances, unable to believe the depth and purity of the sound coming from such a small girl. The host stepped back, giving her space, smiling at the audience and letting the moment breathe. He had seen many performances, but there was something rare about this one. It wasn't just talent or skill. It was sincerity, the kind that only comes from someone performing not for fame or applause, but from a genuine place in their heart. The girl, too absorbed in her music, barely noticed him. She was lost in the notes, letting each one tell a story, and in that moment, she felt free. A few notes into the second part of her piece, She glanced briefly at her notebook. Her hands had memorized the melody, but the small notebook remained a comfort, a touchstone that grounded her. She realized she could do this, that the music she had practiced countless times at home could reach so many people, and it was a powerful, almost magical feeling. A soft smile appeared on her face, just a little, but enough to show that she was beginning to enjoy herself. She had been nervous before, but the fear was now mingling with excitement and joy, a new sensation that made the notes flow even more beautifully. The audience began to respond more openly. Small murmurs of awe spread like waves, whispers of astonishment that grew steadily. Some people in the front rows were holding their hands together, their eyes shining as if trying to capture every moment. A few adults even leaned forward, unable to resist the urge to get closer to the source of this surprising talent. They whispered quietly to each other about how extraordinary it was that such a small girl could produce such an enchanting sound. Children, inspired by what they saw, were mimicking the movement of her fingers in their own hands, imagining that they were playing too. The girl's confidence continued to grow as she moved into the middle section of her performance. The melody became more expressive, weaving through higher and lower notes with a sense of storytelling. Each note carried meaning, conveying emotions that words could never capture. She thought of quiet afternoons spent at home, practicing and dreaming of this moment. The room seemed to echo her feelings, as if the music and the audience were in harmony. It was a connection she had never experienced before, and it made every nervous thought she had felt earlier seem insignificant. Backstage, other performers and organizers watched in admiration. They whispered quietly among themselves, amazed at how such a small child could command attention so fully. Some had expected a timid, shaky performance, but what they saw was the opposite. A young girl who, despite her size and inexperience with large audiences, was captivating everyone. Even the seasoned musicians felt a twinge of awe. They had learned to expect technical proficiency, but this performance was different. It was genuine, heartfelt, and unpretentious. That authenticity created a spell over the room that no amount of experience could replicate. The girl's hands moved fluidly over the keys now. The earlier tension had vanished, replaced by a rhythm she almost felt in her bones. She leaned slightly forward, letting her body sway gently with the melody, completely absorbed. She forgot about the bright lights, the audience, the host, and even the applause she knew would eventually come. In her mind, there was only the music, only the story she was telling through every note and pause. Every chord she struck seemed to resonate not just in the hall, but in herself, filling her with warmth and a sense of wonder she had never imagined before. As she approached the climax of her piece, the notes grew bolder and fuller. She had practiced this section many times, and now, with the energy from the audience and the joy of performing, she played it with a power she didn't know she possessed. The hall seemed to hold its breath, the anticipation thick in the air. The music built up gently, rising and swelling like waves, carrying emotion and creating tension. People in the audience leaned closer, sensing that something extraordinary was unfolding. They were drawn into her world, feeling the story behind the notes, the little girl's bravery, and the passion that shone through despite her age. Suddenly, a small tremble ran through her fingers. She had reached a particularly high sequence of notes, and her nervousness flickered for an instant. But she didn't stop. Instead, she took a breath, smiled softly to herself, and continued. Each note after that felt stronger, more assured. The audience responded instinctively, clapping softly in encouragement, some even whistling quietly. They didn't realize it, but these small reactions fueled her determination. She felt like she could keep going forever, sharing this music with everyone in the room. By the final section of her performance, the audience was completely captivated. Every eye followed her hands, every ear tuned to the melody, and every heart seemed to beat in time with the music. The hall was filled with an almost sacred silence, a quiet reverence that comes only when people are moved beyond words. The girl could sense their attention, and instead of feeling pressure, it made her feel connected. She was no longer a small child on a large stage. She was a storyteller, and her story was being heard by hundreds of people. As she played the final notes, they lingered in the air, soft and lingering, like a memory that refused to fade. The audience remained still for a heartbeat, as if reluctant to break the spell. Then, slowly, the applause began, growing steadily, rising into a roar of appreciation and amazement. People were on their feet, clapping and cheering, some with tears in their eyes. The girl looked around, overwhelmed by the response. She felt pride, relief, and a deep, bubbling joy. She had done something she had never thought possible. She had stepped onto the stage, faced her fear, and shared her music with the world. The host returned to the stage, smiling broadly, and congratulated her with warm words. She felt her cheeks grow warm as he praised her bravery and talent. Backstage, other performers approached, offering high fives and words of admiration. Even strangers who had watched from different parts of the hall came forward to smile, shake her hand, or simply nod in appreciation. She realized in that moment that her performance was not just a personal achievement. It had affected everyone who had witnessed it. As she left the stage, the applause still echoing in her ears, she felt a mix of exhaustion and elation. She had given her all, shared a piece of herself, and the audience had responded with honesty and warmth. It was a moment she would carry forever, a memory of bravery, music, and connection. She knew that this experience had changed her, not just as a performer, but as a person. She had discovered the power of courage, the magic of music, and the joy of sharing her gift with the world. The applause faded slowly, but the memory of it, the feeling of touching so many hearts, stayed with her long after she had stepped off the stage. As the girl reached the final section of her performance, the room was completely silent, filled with anticipation. Every member of the audience seemed to hold their breath, not wanting to miss a single note. The lights above cast a warm glow on the stage, highlighting the small figure at the center, who was playing with a mix of focus and pure emotion. Her fingers moved with grace and confidence, telling a story without words. The music was no longer just a sequence of notes. It had become a language of its own, speaking directly to the hearts of everyone listening. Parents in the audience leaned forward, their eyes shining with emotion. Some covered their mouths with their hands, trying to hold back tears. They whispered quietly to each other, amazed at how a small child could convey such depth through music. Children nearby watched with wide eyes, some clutching their own notebooks or tiny instruments, inspired by what they were witnessing. Even the adults who were used to talent shows and performances felt a rare sense of wonder. They whispered among themselves, exchanging astonished glances, unable to believe that someone so small could fill the room with such powerful music. The girl, absorbed in her performance, barely noticed the reactions around her. She was lost in the rhythm, letting the melody flow naturally from her hands and heart. Each note she played carried the feelings she had tucked away for so long, emotions she had never shared with anyone. She thought of quiet evenings spent practicing in her room, imagining a world beyond her small home, and dreaming of this exact moment. Now, standing on a stage with hundreds of eyes watching, she realized that her dreams were not so far away. She could feel the connection with the audience, a silent understanding passing between her and everyone listening. As the melody swelled, the audience responded more visibly. Soft gasps and whispers of admiration rippled through the room. Some people covered their hearts, overwhelmed by the beauty and sincerity of the performance. A few children mimicked the movements of her hands, imagining that they too were playing the piano. The energy in the room shifted from polite interest to deep, genuine engagement. The music had become a bridge, linking the girl's emotions with those of the audience, creating a shared experience that felt almost magical. Backstage, performers and organizers watched in awe. They had seen many talented individuals over the years, but few had ever captured attention so completely. The girl was not performing with showy gestures or exaggerated moves. She was simply expressing herself, and that authenticity made her performance unforgettable. Even the older performers, who were seasoned and often critical, found themselves leaning closer, caught up in the moment. They whispered softly, acknowledging the rare gift they were witnessing, and some even felt a lump form in their throats. The girl's confidence continued to grow. She had started the performance nervously, but now she moved with poise and assurance. Her hands danced across the keys with ease, guided by a mix of practice, instinct, and emotion. The melody rose and fell like a gentle wave, each note carefully chosen yet flowing naturally. She was telling a story through music, a story of hope, courage, and the joy of sharing something precious with others. The audience could feel it, and their reactions only encouraged her to continue pouring her heart into the performance. Midway through the final section, the music became more intense, carrying a sense of triumph and beauty. The audience was captivated, holding on to every sound, every pause, every subtle shift in the melody. They leaned forward, as if trying to catch the very essence of the girl's emotions. Parents exchanged glances, silently acknowledging the extraordinary moment. Children sat wide-eyed, inspired and amazed. Even strangers who had come simply to watch the event were completely absorbed, feeling an unexpected connection to the small performer on stage. The girl took a deep breath, allowing herself a brief pause to feel the room, to sense the energy surrounding her. She realized that she had found her voice, that the music had become an extension of herself. Each note was infused with her feelings, and the audience responded with unspoken understanding. The silence that had filled the hall was now a presence of its own, as if the room itself was holding onto the music, cherishing every moment. She felt a quiet pride, not in impressing anyone, but in sharing a part of herself so openly and honestly. As the final notes approached, the girl played with deliberate care, savoring each sound. She let the last few chords linger, giving them a sense of completion and closure. The room remained still for a heartbeat, the audience seemingly suspended in the magic of the moment. Then, as if released from a spell, the hall erupted into applause. Hands clapped, cheers rang out, and some stood to give a standing ovation. The sound was overwhelming, a mix of astonishment, admiration, and joy. The girl's small frame seemed to glow under the lights as she took it all in, feeling a mixture of relief, pride, and happiness. The host returned to the stage, smiling broadly and applauding along with the audience. He offered warm words of praise, congratulating the girl on her courage and talent. Backstage, performers and organizers approached, giving high fives, hugs, and words of admiration. The girl's heart swelled as she realized the impact of her performance. She had faced her fears, shared her music, and connected with hundreds of people in a way she had never imagined. It was a moment that would stay with her forever, a memory of bravery, joy, and the power of expressing oneself through art. As she walked off the stage, still absorbing the applause, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had discovered something important, not just her ability to perform, but the way music could touch hearts and bring people together. The experience had changed her, giving her confidence and a sense of purpose. She knew that she would continue to play, to create, and to share her music, inspired by the reactions she had witnessed today. The memory of the audience's astonishment, the warmth of their applause, and the connection she had felt would stay with her, guiding her in every performance she would give in the future. The audience gradually settled back into their seats, still talking in hushed tones about the extraordinary performance they had witnessed. Parents hugged their children, pointing out how inspiring it was to see such talent in someone so young. Strangers shared smiles, acknowledging the rare magic they had all experienced together. The girl's performance had created a ripple effect, inspiring not just those who were present, but those who would hear the story later. It was a reminder that courage, passion, and sincerity could move people in ways that words often could not. Even after the event ended, people lingered in the hall, reluctant to let go of the feeling the music had created. Conversations revolved around the girl, her talent, and the emotion she had conveyed. Some spoke of how it reminded them of their own childhood dreams, others of the importance of encouraging young talent. The story of the small girl on the stage, who had shared her music with courage and heart, began to spread. It was not just about the performance itself, but about the connection, the inspiration, and the simple yet profound impact one person could have on many. The girl herself walked quietly toward the exit, her small notebook clutched in her hands. She felt exhausted yet exhilarated, her mind replaying each note, each reaction, each moment of the performance. She knew that this was just the beginning, that music had the power to open doors, to create bonds, and to inspire others. She carried the experience with her, a treasure she would revisit whenever she needed courage or motivation. The applause, the standing ovation, the astonished faces of the audience. They were all reminders that bravery, honesty, and a love for what one does could leave a lasting mark on the world. After leaving the stage, the girl's heart was still racing. Her hands shook slightly, not from fear anymore, but from the intensity of the experience she had just lived through. She walked slowly toward her family, who were waiting for her with wide smiles and open arms. They hugged her tightly, and she felt warmth and pride radiate through her small frame. For a moment, it felt like the world had paused, letting her breathe in the magnitude of what had just happened. She had performed in front of hundreds of people, shared her music, and witnessed firsthand how something so small could have a big impact. As they left the hall, people around them continued to talk excitedly about the performance. Strangers came up to offer compliments, telling her how wonderful it was to hear her music, how they had never expected such talent from someone so young. Some even asked if she would be performing again soon. The girl blushed, overwhelmed by the attention, but inside she felt a quiet joy. She had faced something terrifying, yet beautiful, and had come out feeling proud of herself. It was more than applause. It was a recognition that her gift mattered, that sharing it could touch hearts and create connections. Later that evening, back at home, she placed her small notebook on her desk and sat quietly, replaying the performance in her mind. Each note, each reaction from the audience, each moment of encouragement flowed through her thoughts. She realized that she had discovered a new part of herself, a courage she hadn't known existed before. The applause, the cheers, and the smiles were unforgettable, but more importantly, she felt a spark inside her that could never be extinguished. It was the spark of possibility, the belief that she could face challenges, pursue her passions, and make a difference, even if it was just one note at a time. Her family gathered around, sharing their own reflections. They spoke softly, praising her bravery, her talent, and the way she had connected with the audience. They reminded her that moments like these were rare, and that she should hold onto the feeling of accomplishment, letting it guide her in future endeavors. The girl listened, absorbing their words, feeling supported and encouraged. It wasn't just about performing. It was about learning to trust herself, to embrace opportunities, and to realize that her voice mattered, even in a world that sometimes seemed too large and intimidating. The story of her performance spread quickly. Friends, neighbors, and even people she had never met came to congratulate her. Social media shared clips and photos from the event, and soon, her talent became known to a wider audience. Yet, despite the attention, she remained grounded. She knew that the real value of the experience lay not in recognition, but in the courage she had discovered and the joy she had found in sharing her music. It was a reminder that talent combined with sincerity could touch lives in ways that applause alone could never capture. In the days that followed, the girl continued to practice, inspired by the positive reactions and the feelings she had experienced on stage. But she did not feel pressure or expectation. Instead, she felt motivation and excitement. She began experimenting with new melodies, exploring her emotions through music, and allowing herself to dream bigger than she had before. She realized that music was more than a hobby. It was a language, a tool, and a way to connect with people. The performance had shown her that even a small person could create a lasting impact when they shared their passion honestly and fearlessly. At school, she noticed subtle changes in the way people treated her. Friends looked at her with admiration. Teachers praised her determination, and even students who had never spoken to her seemed to recognize her confidence. But the girl did not let it go to her head. She remained humble, focusing on her love for music rather than the attention it brought. She understood that the applause was temporary, but the courage, the skill, and the joy she had discovered were permanent. Every note she played from that day forward carried the memory of her first big performance, reminding her that she was capable of more than she had imagined. She also noticed the effect her performance had on others. Younger children approached her, curious and inspired, asking for tips, or simply expressing admiration. They wanted to follow in her footsteps, to find their own courage and voice. The girl realized that her bravery had created a ripple effect, encouraging others to explore their own talents and take chances. She felt a sense of responsibility, not heavy or burdensome, but gentle and motivating. Sharing her gift had become a way to lift others, to inspire and connect, and she cherished that feeling deeply. Over time, she participated in more performances, each one building on the confidence and lessons from that first stage. But the memory of that first note, the stunned audience, and the overwhelming applause remained special. She knew that it was not just about the technical perfection of the music, but the courage to step forward, the honesty of expression, and the joy of sharing something meaningful. Those lessons guided her, shaping her as both a performer and a person, reminding her that bravery and passion could create moments that touched hearts and changed perspectives. The girl's journey was a testament to the power of stepping outside one's comfort zone, even when fear seems overwhelming. She learned that small actions could have big consequences, that sharing one's talents honestly could inspire, connect, and leave a lasting impression. She realized that life offered countless stages, both literal and metaphorical, where courage, persistence, and sincerity could shine. Her first note had not just stunned the room. It had begun a journey, one filled with possibility, growth, and a deep understanding of the impact one person could make. Years later, whenever she reflected on that moment, she remembered the mixture of fear, excitement, and determination that had carried her through. She remembered the audience holding their breath, the silence that followed her final note, and the overwhelming applause that confirmed the power of honesty and courage. She also remembered the quiet moments afterward, sitting with her notebook, replaying every detail, and understanding the value of her experience. That first performance was more than a success. It was a discovery, a reminder, and a foundation for all the music she would share in her life. Even as she grew older, the lessons from that day remained with her. She learned to approach challenges with courage, to embrace opportunities even when they were intimidating, and to understand the importance of sharing one's gifts with the world. She remembered that every note, every action, and every choice had the power to touch someone's heart, sometimes in ways that could never be predicted. And she carried that knowledge with her, letting it guide her in all aspects of life, knowing that even the smallest act of bravery could leave a lasting mark on the world.